My name is Matthew Todd and welcome to Inside the Scale Up. This is the podcast for founders and executives in tech looking to make an impact and learn from their peers within the tech business. We lift the lid on tech businesses, interviewing leaders and following their journey from startup to scale up and beyond, covering everything from developing product market fit, funding and fundraising models to value proposition structure and growth marketing. We learn from their journey so that you can understand how they really work, the failures, the successes, the lessons along the way, so that you can take their learnings and apply them within your own startup or scale up and join the ever-growing list of high-growth UK SaaS businesses. Hey, welcome back to the podcast. Pleased today to be joined by two co-founders on the podcast, which is the first time we've done this, but really excited to hear about the journey. And we've got Alan Jones, Sarah Norford-Jones, co-founders of Yeo Messaging. Good morning. Great to have you here today.
Good morning. Good morning.
Hi, thanks for having us.
No worries. So excited to learn about the Yeo Messaging journey. The things we've spoken about before hitting the record button today are certainly keen to get into the journey, learn more about some of the lessons that you've learned as well. But do you want to kick things off, just both of you, if you could just give a brief kind of personal intro to yourself and explain exactly what Yeo Messaging is as well?
Okay, my name's Alan Jones. I have been in the tech industry for the last 40 years. Sounds like an age, but it's been a hell of a ride, I can tell you, if you look at the changes in the industry over that time. Yeo Messaging is the fifth startup I've been involved with at a founder level. Yeo is born from the realization that we're all vulnerable on messaging platforms and social media platforms, and we have absolutely zero control over anything that we had sent. And I had a desire to repatriate control and to be able to, I'm going to use the word again, control all of my content once it had actually left or I'd hit the send button. And we'll explain a bit more about that later, but Yeo is all about privacy, confidentiality and control.
I am Sarah. I'm one of the co-founders. I'm actually also Alan's daughter. He came to me with the idea of Yeo and wanted my experience from my background is in marketing and advertising. I have worked in that industry for less time than Alan, because obviously I'm his daughter, so 12 years. I've worked client side and also agency side for brands such as Shell, Ferrari, Samsung, to name a few. And Alan came to me with the idea and wanted my knowledge of where best to position it within the market and how do we make it look and nice and feel good and relatable for the industry. So that's kind of my role within Yeo.
Awesome. No, thank you. It sounds really interesting. Keen to get into more detail about what exactly that looks like in practice and how that journey has changed as well. But I guess the first question is why? Why another messaging app? What is missing from the current kind of state of play, security, privacy controls that apps like WhatsApp or other apps are offering to the market?
So basically, every application that is there today, and there are many, and I think we all use probably between 1 and 3 of them, you have no control on anything once you hit the send button. It really is send, and you rely on trust. So you believe that in the integrity of the recipient. So no matter what you send, you're in their hands. And that backfires on a regular basis. And there are no applications today that are lending themselves to protect content post-delivery.
Okay.
And that is exactly the niche and the need that we're addressing with Yeo.
If I can add as well, all of the ones that you listed and many others, they all focus on what happens when a message is going from point A to point B, so the encryption side of it, so man
Yeah.
in the middle attack. What we're doing is actually protecting the message and the content once it's delivered to the device. So it remains in your control once it's even on the device of the recipient.
I see. And what kind of control does it allow you to have over that message then? Is it simply unsending it? Is there more to it than that?
So we use patented facial recognition or continuous facial recognition. So every message that I send, I can set with the Yeo mode setting, which is the your eyes only setting, which means that the recipient has to have their face and only their face in view of the camera of the phone whilst viewing that message. So if they try and show somebody else, the message will actually blur. If someone gets the phone and tries to have a look at what they're sending or what they're receiving, the messages are not visible. So from a point of view of authenticated messaging, we are allowing people to send messages and know that it's only the person that they're sending it to that can view.
Yeah, I see. That sounds like something pretty obvious, but a massive security improvement shift compared to how any messaging app works at the moment. Right? As soon as you unlock the device, it's for anyone to see, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing we do is we authenticate the sender and the recipient. So there's no bad actor position or capability on Yeo. So you know it's me sending it. You know who you're receiving from. So it eliminates phishing, catfishing, grooming, etc. Which is a massive advantage over anything today.
Yeah. And in terms of use cases, then what kind of use cases are you seeing people choose this type of technology for? Is it for like legal? Is it for information that is highly confidential in nature, or are there different kind of use cases that you're seeing?
No, it's exactly that. We will get into our background, I'm sure, of where we kind of started. But right now, what we're really seeing is regulated industries. Any industry that needs a form of authenticated messaging communication is dealing with highly sensitive data, or documents sending, as you said, legal is another one. That's really where we're seeing a lot of demand.
And healthcare, of course.
What kind of healthcare use cases?
A use case at the moment is the Rhinoplasty Society. So that's an obvious one. They're dealing with the face at all stages. And there's been instances where doctors are using WhatsApp to communicate with clients or patients, which is it's in breach of GDPR. It's in breach of any privacy regulation around the world. Yeo enables them to have the instancy of messaging, but to be able to confidently communicate with highly sensitive personal data at any time, and photos and videos of operations, etc.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I can certainly imagine a whole number of use cases, within medical, but other sectors as well, where that would be extremely desirable by any client or party having to have those kind of confidential conversations, or conversations they would want to be confidential. And I know from firsthand experience, you can sometimes feel that that data that should be private isn't. I've been inside hospitals, I think we mentioned on the pre-interview call, and had nurses and other healthcare professionals writing patient notes on the back of a napkin and handing it to other staff to type into a computer system here. The whole information exchange just felt completely non-technical, but also non-private.
Yeah. No, it's absolutely true. And in those situations, under Yeo, you would be able to do a voice recording as well, and so send a voice message. But that could also be sent in what we classify as Yeo mode. So that the person receiving it has to be the one actually holding the device at any stage.
I see. So when you send a message, you can choose what that recipient kind of mode is.
Yes, you can. And you can also geofence.
Okay.
Yeah, I was going to touch on some of the other security features we have. Obviously, we've said the patented continuous facial recognition, but we have geofencing, which allows you to lock your message into a particular location, and as soon as you leave that geofence, the message is no longer available. So if it is a hospital, for instance, you could set your message or your chat feed with a certain person to that hospital location. Which is another really good kind of security element when coupled, especially with the authentication.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm sure everybody is aware of, very high profile examples of WhatsApp messages, etc., getting out into the open and wrong hands and exposed beyond their initial use case.
Yeah. I mean, we see the news helps our argument every single day with some great nuggets, especially the UK government really helps our argument for a need for what we're doing.
So yeah, coming back then, and I'm sure we'll kind of talk about some of the other features and things again, but just taking a step back then, what was that kind of initial founding why for Yeo, and what was that kind of process like to take it from idea to actually inception?
It's quite interesting actually, because the first thing I did was look to prove the key technology. The first thing was well, this is a great idea, but is it practical? Will it really work? Can you actually get the camera on the phone to come on and off in a continuous fashion over a period of time without draining the battery?
Yeah.
How do you optimize, performance over degradation of power? So that's the first thing we did to make sure that it was practical, because often you have a great idea, but you just can't implement it. There are barriers, technical barriers, etc. That was the first thing we did. The next thing, when we proved that could work, was to write the intellectual property, to sit down and properly flowchart the use case and look for the novelty of that use case in order to write the intellectual property.
Interesting.
So before we'd even registered the company, we had gone through that paper exercise in order to do that.
I see. Was that because IP protection was something you thought was being kind of critical to the business?
I think IP protection is a hurdle that you definitely want to have, and it demonstrates that you have applied the appropriate due diligence to your technical solution. And to make sure but just the thought process behind it, to actually put it down on paper and go over it, troubleshoot it, take on constructive criticism for it, and hone your proposition going forward.
So is that IP protected just in the UK? Is that more global than that?
No, we registered the patents in the UK and the USA, which we believe, and also in Europe. So we've got a European patent in process. We have a US patent granted, and the UK patent is granted. The reason we did those territories were they were our initial target markets. And not necessarily the easiest to uphold as far as patents are concerned. There's a lot more respect for patented material within those territories.
Yeah, I see. So with that kind of IP identified, with that, kind of process and everything that goes alongside that fleshed out, then what was the initial product? What was the initial kind of use case or launch of that?
Well, our plan was always to be a consumer messaging platform. We did a lot of market research. We did a YouGov survey, which we got some great feedback and data about consumer usage. And the fact that they wanted to use a messaging application that protected their content and privacy and would be happy to pay for it.
Yeah.
When that came into practice and we launched our consumer application, we actually gave the first 2,000 users the year free. And then after the 2,000 users, I think we gave 1 month free trial, and then there was the paywall. But we noticed a significant drop off of consumer users as soon as they hit the paywall. And that was even before they had their 1 month free. So we had to kind of reevaluate and think, okay, maybe the data that we went out and got isn't actually working, isn't the truth. So at that time, we had been accepted onto an accelerator program called Cylon, which was really a great introduction for us to many, many businesses, a lot of them regulated industry businesses, and kind of the cybersecurity world as such. And we've made a lot of great connections with mentors and partners, potential investors, and all of them were demanding the use for what we had and our technology within their business. Which is when we decided as a company that we wanted to actually shift and pivot what we were doing from consumer to B2B. And we took the app, redesigned it, redeveloped a lot of the things that needed to be done for it to be appropriate for business use. And that is what we have today. It is now, we're now focused on our partnerships and our clients within business. Healthcare was one that we spoke about. We also now offer a white label solution of our application. So companies and businesses can literally take what we have, redesign what we have for their purpose, or integrate our solution within the existing infrastructure.
Interesting. I'd love to get into more detail about that. But why do you think the consumer research, it's always the thing you're told to do is to say, if we built this, would you pay for it? Everyone says yes until it comes time to actually type in that card number. But what do you think the barrier was? Do you think it's just too many free messaging apps and people not really willing to pay for the benefits?
I think that, and I also think that so many people are they've already given away their privacy. They know that they've shared on Facebook for the last 10, 15 years, or they've shared, they exchange privacy and their data like it's nothing, it's air. And so I feel like they've already done the damage. So when it came to it, they almost were like, oh, it's done now.
Personally, I think things are changing. I think there's been so much more awareness through journalists like yourself and government initiatives, etc., to make people realise the danger of being totally open on social media, etc. We've had situations where people could be monitored on Facebook as to where they were while somebody's knocking off their house, etc. And there's other situations like young mothers being very, very conscientious now about posting pictures of their children. There's dozens and dozens of examples, even down to the glorious Matt Hancock recently. People are becoming aware of the ramifications of just being frivolous with their privacy and on social media. So I think it's changing, but when we first launched, there was this tendency to, first of all, all your friends are already on one of these platforms. Yeah. So you either move en masse or you have a leg in two camps all the time. And so that cross-pollination isn't there even today, which makes it difficult. And the legacy contacts and so on, again, unless you you move en masse, new products like ours are going to be slow to take over in markets, and we would be used for specific cases, like someone doing a financial transaction, somebody wanting to share secret information between themselves, organize a surprise party, etc. A lot of that stuff starts to go to Yeo.
Yeah.
And I'm seeing more people using it for finance and discussion of personal medical data.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. There's definitely that network effect, like you say, people moving en masse. But I agree that people are becoming more aware of certainly what they share on social media, or some people, but you still see people, on the Facebook feed or whatever it may be, certainly, compromising, what should be kind of personal identity kind of information, whether it's, oh, I'm going to be away from the house type of post like you mentioned, or these kind of quizzes and polls and tests that they do where they don't realize they're giving away all this information that could be used, in the wrong hands for the wrong purposes.
Yeah, there's always somebody that, well, we've seen it. There are so many cases of people being basically abused online by gleaming information from social media, etc.
Or even just, there's a lot of people out there that you wouldn't think, oh, it won't happen to me, or I've got nothing to hide.
Yep.
And then they're the people that will have their whole identity stolen for, fraud in some way, because they've shared, pictures of, I don't know what, and, identifying objects within their photographs that they share. We've done a lot of research into this, and that's one of our biggest passions and drivers for what we're doing is protecting people. So there's a lot we could go into on that, but
I think there's that. I've got nothing to hide is what I hear a lot of people saying. I think, like you say, people have almost given up on privacy because they used to personalize ads on Facebook and everything else. So they just kind of accept that they know everything about me anyway. And sometimes, it's scary how they seem to know so much about me. Like, I was stood next to so-and-so and now I'm seeing adverts related to the things that we were showing. So they just, almost have defaulted to, I can't push back against that anyway. So I may as well just.
Or even, or even just talking nowadays. You hear, I don't know, the other day I was saying something like, oh, I need to buy some more dog food for our dog. And all of a sudden I'm served with loads and loads of dog food ads. It's like, are you listening to me?
Yeah, it can certainly
the
feel like
devices
that
are
sometimes.
I think legislation is moving to change that. The latest the Privacy Act and so on is coming through. Now, I think it will change it. It will hopefully limit the numbers of cold calls that we get. My poor old mum, she's 88 years old, and when she gets a call saying somebody, they're so familiar with her about her electricity, or they call from the bank or whatever, and they get confused because they don't come from a background where they're rude to people. They like to hear and take on board what somebody's saying before they make a judgment. But you can just watch her being led down the garden path by some guy who's reportedly going to help her in some way. Meanwhile, they're embezzling money from these vulnerable people, all the time.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think, as you say, the information that they can have access to just makes it so much more convincing, doesn't it? I know that, my parents have had calls that they have been suspicious of, and sometimes it can genuinely be hard to tell, whether they were or were not genuine because of that information that they had and the way they came across.
Yeah, and what these people do is that they take the information that from social media, eventually they end up with your phone number, and bingo, away they go. They know who you are, where you visit, who your relationships are with, etc. And they can pose from a position of familiarity, which leads you into a false sense of security, and bingo. Suddenly there's £1,000 gone from your account or whatever.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think going back to the kind of case for secure messaging, I think, whilst technology has done clearly a lot of very, very good things, a lot of innovations, I think there hasn't really been too many like proven ways to securely communicate information. So, you deal with, any number of other businesses or parties, you pay them for services, you need to send them money, you need to take money for things that you sell or whatever it may be. Quite often people still will just resort to an email. Oh, I need you to email me a scan of your passport. Well, I don't really think I should be sending that to you on email, but what choice do you have if that, most common method is the fallback?
Well, we think within 5 years, people will say, just yo it to me.
Yeah.
And at that stage, you will automatically have a link from your email package or your your other messaging application where you will be able to yo a document, and it will require facial recognition in order to open it. And I mean on a continuous basis in yo mode. We already are doing that with Slack. We will implement it with Microsoft Teams and other applications. So people can actually choose when they want to send a secured document or a secured message and use our technology to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm already thinking about numerous conversations with people like accountants, etc., that I wish had happened, would happen on to be perfectly honest. And I know people that have had their accountants that outsource work and things like this, and there have been data breaches, and they've almost lost their entire business because the registration details have effectively moved to a different person, and it's been months and months of pain trying to access all of their accounts and act as a legitimate business.
Yeah, there's some, personally, I see, there are so many day-to-day activities that we have, or use cases like new insurance. Say you're trying to insure high-value art or jewelry. The way they conduct the business today is, send me through the receipts. And you send through receipts or valuation certificates via email and could be messaging.
Yeah.
So these are totally open sources of information. So if I once said to a very well-known insurer that you're asking me to send all of this information through to you, so where's it stored? And he said, I can refer you to our tech team and blah, 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 blah. It's stored here or there. And then I just suddenly thought, well, if I was a thief, basically, yeah. If I was a thief, then what I would do is go to an insurance company like yours. I'd scan the files so I know who had what jewelry in the local area and what the safes were, because you also give the information on the safe.
Yeah.
So you'd have all of that information. You just pinpoint them and away you go.
So if there's any thieves listening to this podcast, there we go.
Yeah, Yo will foil you. Yeah, because if they were secured and they were secured with continuous facial recognition, then nobody could get them. It would not be decrypted in any easy way, and it would be secured. And then there's the medical situation where you go to your GP, you have some tests run, etc., and they then require you to go back in to pick up a letter to give you the results, because they don't want to send them by mail, and or a secured portal. A secured portal means you get an email to say you should go to a portal in order to retrieve information, but they don't know it's you.
No.
They have no idea at all.
And it's also from a user perspective, it's just a pain to have to remember all these different passwords to enter into a secure portal. They put you through different hoops and loops to get there.
Yeah,
and then
yeah.
once you're there, they're so clunky and old fashioned. It's not that instant messaging that we're now used to, where, you receive something, it's like, ping, it's there, you've got it. And, how much nicer would it be from a user perspective to have that secure portal, but always as an inbox on your device that you can access all the time, and you can have messages come through from bank, healthcare, insurance, accountants, all in one place. That's kind of our biggest vision for Yeo, is always to be the secured inbox on your device, instead of multiple secured portals that you must enter.
Yeah. These secure portals aren't actually as secure as people would want them to be. If, as you say, they're these clunky systems, all based on email ultimately as the securing factor. So yeah, I can certainly see how with Yeo you're doing both. You're improving the security, you're improving that control by making sure it's not just when I send it to you was that delivery secure, but it's about who is reading it and when are they reading it, etc. as well. But ultimately it is a more streamlined, smoother experience, on top of that. So yeah, I guess I'm wondering, with such a clear benefit, such a broad number of use cases, and I wish every company I had to engage with was now using Yeo. How do you start to commercialize, roll this out? Are you kind of going use case by use case? How have you tackled that?
Okay, well, we have what we call inbound traction right now, which is companies coming to us and saying, we have to use your product. And there we have people like the Rhinoplasty Society, where they basically said, look, we've got to be using this. We have a problem. You are the answer.
Yeah.
We've had situations with there's a digital content network that again come to us and said, we have to use your application. It eliminates phishing. We need a secure platform for payments and for financial arrangements. We've had solicitors come to us, a group of UK solicitors, and again saying, we have an issue. We are sending restricted information, and our clients are sending information on WhatsApp. We need to eliminate that. We need a secured, auditable platform in order to enable this to happen.
Yeah.
So that's what we call inbound traction. Outbound wise, what we're doing is we are developing, first of all, we will make our solution cloud agnostic, which means it will run on an AWS platform, and a Google platform, or Azure, etc., etc. The next thing we're doing is developing the application programmers interfaces so it can be easily integrated with common business management applications.
Yeah.
Therefore, the communication aspect becomes part of what you do every day, not an addition to it. It's integrated within it, which makes it much easier to use. At that point, which will be early summer this year, we will then start a sales drive to address all regulated industry, and we will pick them off. We will start off with private medical practice because it's a lower bar, lower hurdle to get into. We will go into wealth management and small private banks, insurance from the broker side, initially, and look at tackling other verticals that require highly confidential, private confidential, and auditable communication in any way.
Yeah.
So we've got a busy summer coming up.
Sounds like you certainly have, but it sounds like a very, very solid, well thought out approach of hitting those areas, as you say, where they are regulated, so they have more to lose. As you say, it's that low hanging fruit where they're dealing with that confidential information anyway, and most likely struggling to do it effectively, and probably quite aware of that as well, I imagine.
Absolutely.
One thing to also mention, we have we call it the consumer app. It is our free application that is available on the App Store and on Google Play Store. We do minimal marketing in terms of driving downloads for that, but we use that as a really good kind of test bed for features and things that we're improving within the app. So I just thought that would be worthwhile mentioning, because obviously although we are targeting businesses, we do need consumer users, as they will be the clients or the patients or what am I trying to say? The users for the business use cases.
Yeah, no, I think that's really interesting, actually, because I know a lot of SaaS businesses that have made that transition from B2C to a B2B model, because they realize that things like the cost of acquisition on B2C and the scale that they need are just too high to make that, revenue generating business sustaining. So therefore they go to B2B where there are bigger opportunities. But I think it's really interesting to keep that B2C element, although not where the drive is, still going to get those lessons and to get a bit of that network effect as well.
Exactly. And without any paid marketing or any real drive in that area, we are still seeing daily downloads, which is pretty nice to see. And it's scaling slowly and organically alongside our kind of sales push for business.
Yeah, no, I think that's really interesting to see. And I think, a lot of founders listening to this that have been thinking about or potentially made that switch should possibly then consider whether it is worth keeping that B2C element just, as a sustainable kind of strand to their business, although the main sales drive could be B2B. But I think, for some types of products, keeping the B2C going with a slow but steady growth could still, drive platform growth ultimately and grow into other use cases as well, I imagine.
Yeah. Yeah, I also think the data reform bill will help, because people have to then be more conscious of the control of private media, how they communicate with consumers, etc. And I think again that puts more and more emphasis onto for companies to incorporate services like Yeo into their arsenal of communication.
Yeah, I guess that legislation is obviously going to open up a lot of doors, because companies will have to adopt more secure communication practices. But I suppose in terms of awareness building as well, it's got to do a good job for you in terms of making people more aware of the problems with current solutions that are out there.
Yeah, I think it would go a long way. It would go a long way to eliminate, well, I'm praying for this, to eliminate these calls you get every 5 minutes from somebody trying to either sell you something or con you out of something, because they are clamping down heavily on that, unsolicited calls, etc. Although it will be really interesting to see how they can police it.
Absolutely. I guess that's part of the problem as well, is how is any of that even going to be enforced?
That's the next stage, isn't it? And it's a bit like us going back to the very beginning. Well, let's see whether it works first of all, before we implement it. If only government was the same, instead of somebody writing up some new legislation thinking this is a great idea. Is it practical? can it be enforced?
Yeah, absolutely. And on the note of that legislation as well and the online safety bill, I know a number of messaging app creators have, been pretty critical of some of the proposals because they believe it will weaken security by essentially enforcing that, client side, the apps must report certain types of content and enable certain types of, government monitoring for, law enforcement, terrorism, all of those purposes. What's your view on that?
There's been a lot of rumours and comments about different companies saying they will pull out of the UK because if we restrict encryption, there has been, I think, feedback from, again, other organisations concerned about the monitoring of data. I believe that the data I generate is mine.
Yeah.
And I as long as I can retain ownership of that and control of that, I'm happy. I sincerely believe with the way that we have designed Yeo that enforces and underlines that my personal goals, which is retention of ownership of your data, protection of your data and control of your data. Therefore, as Yeo Messaging, we welcome the changes to the legislation. I believe that they are forward-thinking, and I believe provided they can be enforced, will make our lives safer and go a long way towards making our children's lives safer.
Effectively, what we're looking at is legislation that is adding more responsibility to organizations that use user-generated data, no matter what type of data that is. And obviously GDPR, I know there was a lot of talk about that at the time, and you can argue about whether it's even been effective and whether people comply with it. But it sounds like this is another kind of layer on top, which is actually better suited to how people do communicate and share data these days. So therefore, at least if there is that legislation there should be that corporate responsibility to treat, customer data appropriately.
Yeah. I think one thing that they have done in this legislation is they're removing the requirement for an independent compliance officer, and which some people will say, oh, thank goodness for that. I don't have an independent I don't need to have independent audit. However, what it is saying is we will remove that requirement provided you have, you pay attention to data protection plans, to protecting the data of and privacy of your consumers, and provided you stop abusing the data that you're gathering. And I think that that's a fair trade-off.
Yeah.
Okay, let's make it easier and let's cut some of the administration and let's put the onus on companies to be more responsible. There's always going to be those that go around it. So what they've then done is they've increased the amount of fines that can be applied if you do buck the system.
Yeah.
So it's, what is it, stick and carrot really, isn't it? I think as a business, I was very pleased to cut down on administration. But it's easy to say as a company that's totally focused on privacy. So
yeah.
But I think for many businesses, it will make things easier, provided they respect the data that they have.
Yeah, absolutely, and I can certainly see that. With these changes and just the general direction, as you say, awareness of privacy. That as soon as Yeo does become more widespread in different interactions that people have with the different businesses and services they use, I can certainly see how there will be an increased expectation then from consumers and businesses in terms of what they expect with the security of their data, how they expect that to be managed. And even just through talking through some of the use cases that you've outlined, I can immediately see that I'm certainly going to be more aware of these interactions I have with different companies and how insecure they are, and start to question, well, hang on, should you really be asking for that data in that way? What are you going to do with it, and how long are you going to keep it for? How long will you have access to that, and where will that access be provided?
Yeah. No, I think that's very smart to do that. And the more people that do it, the more awareness we create. I think we can reverse this trend where people basically forfeit their privacy rights in order for payment for free services like what Meta offer, for instance.
Yeah, absolutely. And for Yeo itself as a platform, obviously you've talked through a lot of the very powerful sounding features that you've got at the moment. Where do you see Yeo heading? What is the vision? What is the ambition?
At one stage, we would have said we'd like to see it on everybody's mobile phones and everybody using it. We still have ambition for Yeo to become the secured inbox and the trusted vehicle to go to for highly confidential and private communication. And I think that we can achieve that. We would like Yeo to be the acronym for anything that you want to protect. We always said, I always had this thing that Sarah would probably say, oh, don't say it. But it was always, don't show it, Yeo it. And that was it. And
that's our tagline.
As corny as that is, we hope that in the next 5 years that will become the case, where people will go to send something and you'll be going, whoa, don't do that, just Yeo it to me. Because that's the way to get something where you can be assured of the privacy, the control, the confidentiality.
Yeah, and I can see how the strategy that you talked about in terms of not just having the app, but then opening it up via APIs and everything else reinforces that vision, right? It's just so in line with that, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think for us, as long as it's out there and it's being used, it doesn't matter in what form that is, which is why we decided to have a white label side of what we're doing. Also, we're happy for businesses to take certain parts of the technology that we have and we offer and integrate it. So we're less focused. We are focused, obviously. We have a vision for Yeo to be the secured inbox, but we don't mind how it looks now. We don't mind if people want to take our technology and call it something else or integrate it into what they already have, or powered by Yeo.
Yeah, and I can see how it's Yeo, meaning your eyes only, is very much category defining in terms of a way of communicating and sending data. As you say, it's the secure inbox. It's controlling, making sure that the person that you intended to see it is actually the person that is seeing it as one. And I think that's as much about the positioning of your platform, the capabilities and the problem, as it is with the underlying technology as well. It seems like those two things coming together, it could be extremely powerful in changing those communication styles.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think integration is the key. Trying to change human behavior and the way we use these tools that we use every single day in our business life is incredibly difficult. So if you're able to seamlessly plug in, so it becomes another feature rather than another application to learn, I believe that it would make the adoption of the Yeo Secure platform much easier. So it becomes a way. The way it works in Slack, you can actually just click and send a Yeo message from within Slack, which is I'm like, hallelujah, because Slack is not a very, very secure application. It's a great communications tool within business and so on. But
Yeah.
when you suddenly want to attach a PDF there, which is declaring your strategy for the next 3 years, do you actually trust everybody on there? It's suddenly like, how can I be sure somebody doesn't download that, send it off to somebody else?
Absolutely. And they could use it in any way. And I know with Slack as well, I've seen, forums online where employees or previous employees of companies have been concerned about whether those employers will have access on like an enterprise plan to all of their communications with anybody that they've had on that Slack account and platform.
Yeah. Unfortunately, in regulated industry, they have to have that.
Yeah.
And, which is why we hope to win in from a regulated industry and a business product point of view against companies like Signal, who have a tremendous consumer application.
Yeah.
Very secure with most amazing privacy rights, etc. But because of that, they're unable to provide a backup. So they can never ever provide an audit path, which is required by regulated industry.
I see.
So, you've got Yeo with similar encryption capabilities, a similar privacy policy, but with the ability to have a third-party depository as an audit trail. But even then, that requires the facial recognition.
I see.
Yeo.
Interesting.
So you get the ultra security, but you do get the ability to address regulated industry as well.
So you're kind of combining those two elements. You're not having such a big trade-off, but you are building for those specific regulated use cases, but still very much with that security and privacy at the forefront.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And it's a difficult one to manage, but I believe that we've now come up with a way of doing it in order to satisfy compliance officers, etc., within these businesses, and to maintain the integrity of the communication.
Yeah, no, I think that sounds like quite an achievement. That sounds like that could genuinely be game changing in terms of the way people communicate. And yeah, I'm just kind of conscious that we've been talking for a while. I think there's a lot of really, really interesting points for people to consider, generally about the way they communicate the security, the privacy of that. Certainly for anyone else building a B2C or B2B platform, a lot for them to think about in terms of how they manage data as well. And obviously would recommend people look at checking out Yeo for those purposes as well, especially as you're opening up those APIs. But for any other founders of a tech company listening to this conversation, based on your experience of getting Yeo to this point, what advice would you like to leave them with from this episode?
I would say, first of all, go into get some training before you start. It's almost like it's a marathon. It isn't a sprint. So be prepared for it. Make sure that you have the staying power. Never lose sight of your goals. Be prepared to tack along the journey. I think something else that I always tell young founders and friends is basically, be as a startup, as an entrepreneur, and as a startup, have an ultimate goal, but be prepared to address it in the same way you would a channel crossing in a yacht. So you need to allow for the wind and the waters and many, many other things that are going to throw you in one way or another, many outside of your control. But keep your eye on the horizon, keep your eye on your goal, and you'll get there. And select your partners very carefully. I'm very lucky. I've got somebody that is not only close to me, but very tenacious, intelligent and capable, and can tell me straight when they believe I'm wrong. And I think as a founder, listen, take on board. You might not like what people say, but take it on board, process it, and come back out and be better.
Thank you. No, I think that's great advice. How about your side, Sarah?
Yeah, I was going to just say, I think one thing that Alan always says, which is something that I've always kept hold of, is don't fall in love with your product because love is blind. So be passionate about what you're doing and be passionate about what you're trying to achieve and your goals, but don't fall in love. If we were completely in love and blinded by what we were doing, we wouldn't have been able to change and shift and adapt it to what the market wants. So I think that's always a good one to leave people with.
Yeah, absolutely. Certainly see a lot of people, falling in love with their solution a bit too much, often more than the problem that they're actually trying to solve.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's the other nugget, isn't it? Yeah, address problems, provide painkillers, not vitamins.
Yeah, absolutely, couldn't agree more. But thank you for a really, really interesting, insightful conversation. As I said a minute ago, I think any founder or aspiring founder will be able to take a lot from this conversation. So thank you for sharing the Yeo journey so far. And I certainly look forward to keeping track of Yeo, seeing it develop. And I really genuinely wish that a lot more companies would use Yeo or a platform like it to take our privacy security a lot more seriously. So thank you for the time. Much appreciated.
Thank you for having us. Yeah, great to speak with you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for joining me on this episode of Inside the Scale Up. Remember, for the show notes and in-depth resources from today's guest, you can find these on the website insidethescaleup.com. You can also leave feedback on today's episode, as well as suggest guests and companies you'd like to hear from. Thank you for listening.